I was stunned when my cheating wife returned from her lover, took a shower, and announced, "Darling, come to me, I'm ready to have a baby." I coldly replied, "Don't bother, I know everything. And soon Derek's wife will know too, that her husband is about to become a father." She turned pale and fainted, but that was only the beginning. And here's what happened next. Unfortunately, there are people who do terrible things and think they can get away with it, but they don't. Sooner or later, they will be caught. My wife had an impeccable alibi and generally gave no reason for jealousy. However, as soon as I noticed one strange detail, a puzzle formed in my head. Small details can often indicate problems in a marriage. The first sign appeared when I noticed that the hair on the back of her neck was damp. I usually didn't pay much attention to this area, but when she slipped into bed, I wanted to hug her. When I reached for her, my hand accidentally touched the moisture and I couldn't help thinking, what is this? That evening, she had been at one of her monthly extended library board meetings, and I stayed up looking forward to her return, hoping that we could have a pleasant evening. It had been a week since our last intimate moment, but that evening I realized there was clearly something wrong with my wife, and she was hiding something. My wife went by the name Mona. At 28, she wasn't conventionally stunning, but her remarkable physique compensated for any lack of facial attractiveness. I adored her. She was intelligent, had a great sense of humor, and I believed I could rely on her implicitly. She worked as an environmental biologist for the state's Environmental Protection Department. My name is Jim, 30 years old, a civil engineer employed by a consulting firm. Together, we earned well and purchased a charming 3-bedroom bungalow in the suburbs a year ago. We met through our professional roles and immediately clicked. After dating for 6 months, during which we enjoyed a passionate physical relationship, we got engaged. A few months later, we exchanged vows in a church ceremony, pledging fidelity, respect, and trust before God. We were both committed to building a family together. A week before, Mona had stopped taking birth control pills as it was her most fertile period. A year ago, when we moved into our house, Mona became friends with a neighbor named Sally who was actively involved in local events. Sally, a single divorced woman about the same age as Mona, quickly found common ground with her. They often went shopping and to the cinema together. I didn't mind when my wife went out with our neighbor because I was sure that everything was fine. Sally introduced Mona to the local library board, which initially held short monthly meetings. However, a couple of months ago, the meetings suddenly became longer, taking place twice a month and lasting 4 hours each time. Mona explained that they were working on implementing a new computer system in the library to make it more interactive. And because she was good with computers, she was asked to collaborate with the head librarian after meetings to determine criteria for the system. This explanation seemed reasonable to me, so I didn't attach much importance to it. However, I noticed that after the first lengthy board meeting, Mona was noticeably tense and distracted. When I asked, she mentioned that it was difficult to work with the head librarian and that he required special treatment. But again, it didn't bother me much. And now back to her hair. Why was it a little wet that night? Judging by the humidity, she was either sweating or had taken a shower somewhere. Why would she sweat or need a shower when she was supposedly at a meeting? I knew she hadn't showered or washed when she got home because I was awake and waiting for her. Sniffing, I smelled another soap, not the one she usually uses. Where could she have taken a shower? At a motel? My suspicious mood deepened just as she started to pull away. Not today, honey. I'm too tired. The meeting was long. I'm exhausted and tomorrow we both have to go to work, she said. All right, honey. Get some rest, I answered. After that, she moved to her side of the bed, turning away from me and quickly falling asleep. It seemed strange to me that she didn't want intimacy because we were kind of planning and ready to create a full-fledged family. We wanted to have a child. However, I remembered her habit of avoiding intimacy after library meetings, citing fatigue. This reinforced my suspicions. Maybe she didn't want me to discover something that could give away her infidelity. Why did I think that she would cheat on me? Because I had no other justification for her behavior. We had been discussing the idea of starting a family. After 5 years of marriage, we decided to postpone parenthood until we were financially stable enough for my wife to stop working. Recently, I was promoted and we felt it was the right time to try for a baby, so she stopped taking the pill a week ago. However, I couldn't shake off a nagging concern. What if things didn't work out between us and I ended up responsible for child support? I needed to carefully consider my options. I lay awake for a long time pondering what to do next. The first immediate decision was to postpone intimacy with her, but how could I do that without arousing suspicion? It was a difficult dilemma. Presenting her with minimal evidence of infidelity would most likely lead to denial, and I would be in a vulnerable position. I needed to protect myself as much as possible. I needed more concrete evidence, which meant I had to buy time before we got close again. On the other hand, if there was a chance that she could get pregnant by someone else tonight, she might insist on intimacy this weekend to hide it. It was a difficult situation that required a careful approach. After carefully considering all the options, I finally settled on a plan of action that seemed promising. If she was really intimate with him tonight, then most likely, soon after that, she would want intimacy with me to ensure the conception period was covered. I had to be away for at least a week or more. Planning a business trip seemed to me the most appropriate way to assess her reaction. Although I didn't travel often for work, when I did, it usually lasted about a week, which could fit any scheme I developed. Now, what other information did I require? Yes. Who was her paramour? How long had their affair been ongoing? Where did they rendezvous? If their encounters coincided solely with library board meeting nights, it could imply that her lover was a fellow member of the board. I had to investigate a few things, so I quietly left the bed and went downstairs, where I located her purse. It was the repository for all her valuable belongings and seemed like a promising place to search for clues. While examining her credit cards, I came across one bearing her maiden name, Mona Spencer. It belonged to a bank we weren't affiliated with, prompting me to wonder why she possessed it. I had assumed she had disposed of all her pre-marriage cards, but evidently, she had held on to one. Delving deeper, I discovered a hidden pocket containing a business card belonging to Derek Matthews, the head librarian at our local library. Crap, the head librarian was male. She had led me to believe otherwise. Damn her. I examined the call logs on her cell phone and noticed Derek's number appearing frequently, indicating ongoing communication between them. It seemed to have been happening for some time. There were no instant messages suggesting they communicated verbally. Nonetheless, I returned everything to her purse and checked our computer for messages. I discovered she had an encrypted email folder, but I possessed enough knowledge to bypass her security measures and uncovered a substantial collection of messages exchanged between them dating back to when she began attending late meetings with him. These messages revealed that they had been rendezvousing at the Red Roof Inn near the interstate junction. Some of their exchanges were explicit, indicating they had engaged in activities she had never participated in with me. I grew increasingly angry. In one email, they disparaged both me and his wife, although they claimed to love us. The more I read, the angrier I became. I copied all their emails to my own folder with the intention of printing them later, then proceeded upstairs to one of the spare bedrooms where my clothes were stored in the closet. This left the walk-in closet in the master bedroom for her belongings. I retrieved my suitcase and garment bag and began packing for an apparent business trip. At 5:30 a.m., I prepared for my journey and entered our bedroom. Mona, still groggy, sat up. "Why are you awake so early, Jim? And why are you dressed?" "I have a flight to catch, darling. I didn't have a chance to tell you last night, but I need to leave around 7. Work called me last night. They need someone to quickly survey some of our out-of-date projects. I'll grab something to eat at the airport, so don't worry about breakfast." She gazed at me, trying to comprehend what I had just said. "All right, sweetheart. How can I reach you if I need to?" she asked, yawning. "Just call me on my cell phone." "Goodbye, darling." I gave her a peck on the cheek and hurried downstairs with my bags. Suddenly, there was a thud behind me, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. She appeared at the top of the stairs and called out, Jim, what about starting a family? We plan to discuss it this weekend. We'll have to postpone it until next month, darling. I'll give you a call once I reach my first destination." As I opened the garage door and got into my car, I heard a loud sob from behind me. I was already driving down the street before she could say anything more. After ensuring my cell phone was switched off, I headed towards the interstate. 2 hours later, I reached my father's retirement home situated by a lake in the remote countryside. Dad, a widower who lived alone, wasn't expecting me, but he promptly began preparing breakfast for us. While sipping his strong morning coffee, I shared the troubling news about Mona. Dad, who had always longed for a daughter and saw Mona as filling that role, was deeply saddened by her betrayal and couldn't fathom her actions. "Son, I'm at a loss for words. Your mother and I had a strong relationship, and to my knowledge, she never strayed. You'll have to navigate this situation carefully without rushing into any decisions," he advised. "I understand, Dad. Tomorrow, I'll return to the city to consult with my lawyer, Ed Wiltz. I need to understand my legal options," I replied. "Ed is trustworthy. We've relied on him for years," Dad reassured me. "All right, Dad. Your coffee is as great as ever, and your omelets are unbeatable," I complimented. "Well, if you ever find yourself cooking your own meals, you'll have the chance to perfect your skills," he joked. "Got it." I chuckled in response. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, I phoned my office and spoke to my boss. We agreed that if Mona called looking for me, he would simply say that I was on the road and they reached me on my cell phone. He even instructed the receptionist to provide the same story to anyone who called. I also requested a week's vacation, which he approved. When I checked my messages, I saw that Mona had tried to call me 4 times, asking me to call her back as soon as possible. I decided to let her wait a bit, so I waited until around noon to call her at work. She seemed a bit stressed when she asked about my whereabouts. "Where are you, honey? Is it possible for me to fly out and spend the weekend with you?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm leaving tomorrow and I'm not sure when I'll have a place to stay for a while. Let's make plans for sure next month. Gotta go now. The guys are calling for me." After hearing her say, "I love you," I ended the call. My dad, who had overheard, simply shook his head. The following day, I phoned and scheduled an appointment with Ed Wiltz. The next day, I drove back to town for my appointment. "It's great to see you, Jim. So what brings you in today?" Ed asked. "My wife has cheated on me with another man, and I need to understand my legal recourse." For the next 30 minutes, we deliberated on the most feasible courses of action, and he suggested that if I desired to divorce, the easiest route would be to file on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Pursuing a divorce based on adultery would entail the burden of proof falling on me, and obtaining evidence that would hold up in court would be very costly. With no children in the picture and considering that my wife was a well-compensated professional, the financial aspect of the divorce would likely result in a straightforward 50-50 division of assets. I inquired about the possibility of her being pregnant by the other man and was relieved to learn that I wouldn't be liable for child support. I expressed gratitude for his guidance and assured him I would inform him of my decision in a few days. After meeting with Ed, I went to the main library and wandered until I spotted an office door labeled Head Librarian. Grabbing a magazine, I settled where I could discreetly observe the door. After about 30 minutes, a man around my age emerged. He was unremarkable in appearance, blending into a crowd effortlessly. I pondered why she would jeopardize our marriage for an affair with him. Having glimpsed the rival, I departed and made my way to a nearby electronics store, purchasing a pricey voice-activated recording device. Next, I checked into the Red Roof Inn where they had been meeting, securing a room for the night. With time to kill, I slipped back home to check our PC. Their recent emails hinted at her anxiety over a possible pregnancy from their last encounter. As we hadn't been intimate to cover her betrayal, they feared he could be implicated for any resulting child. It was satisfying to see their concern. I copied the messages to my records and left. After dinner, I went back to my motel room and watched TV for a while. In the end, I turned it off and lay down on the bed, absorbed in thinking about why she did this to our marriage. As far as I knew, we had a warm relationship and we were planning a wonderful future together, including children and retirement. However, she decided to give it all up. Although our sex life was satisfactory, it did not have the spark that it had in the first years of our life together. Her reaction to my business trip suggested that she was pregnant by her lover. Her decision to give him preference as the potential father of her child made me question whether she had deep feelings for him or whether there was a darker, more complex aspect of her personality akin to Jekyll and Hyde. Thinking about our life together, I couldn't help feeling sad and regretful about the 5 years we spent together, which now seemed to have been wasted. Although we had moments of happiness, the pain of our current situation overshadowed it all. I think I've come to understand that even if she hadn't gotten pregnant by him, I couldn't forgive her. Divorce seemed like the only option, but I knew I'd have to confront her first, and I wasn't looking forward to it. Around 2 o'clock, I called home on my cell phone and spoke to her. She sounded like she had been crying, so I asked her what was wrong. "You don't sound well, sweetheart. Are you sick?" "Oh, Jim, I just want you home." "Well, I'll try to wrap things up quickly. Hang in there. Why don't you go talk to Sally? I'm sure she can cheer you up." I had a feeling that Sally might be involved in my wife's infidelity, so I had nothing to lose if they spent time together now. "Okay, honey, come home soon. I love you." "I will, sweetheart. Bye." I hope she noticed that I didn't say I love you when I hung up. That night at 11 o'clock, I went to the motel office and encountered a young man working alone. I was relieved it was him on duty as a female clerk might have been unwilling to assist me. After some casual conversation, I broached the topic and offered him $100 for assistance. Recognizing his likely modest pay, I hoped the offer would motivate him to provide me with a record of the times my wife and Derek had met at the motel. He agreed to look into the motel records, and I provided him with my wife's maiden name and the suspected start date of their meetings. I surmised they might be using the credit card under her maiden name, which I found in her purse, to avoid detection. He assured me he would work on it overnight and have the list ready for me by morning. I went to bed feeling low and had a restless night's sleep. I arrived at the office early, and my contact already had my list prepared, confirming my expectations. They checked in after the library meetings. When I showed him a photo of my wife, he recalled her because she had registered using her credit card. He mentioned that they typically only occupied the room for about an hour before departing in separate cars. He noted that this was typical of the numerous unfaithful spouses he had encountered. After breakfast, I returned to my father's house. The remainder of the week was spent fishing, and on Thursday, I phoned Ed Wiltz to request the initiation of the divorce proceedings. He assured me that he would have the papers ready in a few days. Each evening, I continued to phone home pretending to be in a different city, thus giving Mona the impression I was away. She seemed increasingly despondent with each call, evoking a sense of pity within me, yet I remained resolute in my determination not to release her from accountability. My desire for revenge was palpable, though tinged with a sense of bitterness. I returned home Friday afternoon while she was still at work. Based on their recent emails, it seemed the affair was winding down. The fear of her pregnancy had greatly affected their relationship. It appeared I wouldn't require the tape recorder anymore so I could return it and reclaim my money. I had ample evidence of her infidelity regardless. I started printing 2 copies of their email exchanges. I felt Derek's wife deserved to see the documentation of their affair. My next choice would be whether to confront Mona immediately or wait until she confirmed she was pregnant. When Mona returned from work, she hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Jim, I've missed you so much," she said. "My God, darling. What happened? Is the sink clogged up again?" I replied jokingly. "No. I realized how much I love you and miss you when you left. After we eat, I want to get you into bed and do what we've been planning for so long. If that's what you want, maybe I should leave more often." No, I don't want you to leave me again." "All right, honey. Let's have dinner together and then go to our bedroom to indulge in mutual intimacy." "It sounds like a plan," she said, smiling through her tears. God, I felt like such a fool. I suggested we go somewhere, so we went to the nearest restaurant, had a quick snack, and went home. When we went upstairs to our bedroom, she was running there at the speed of light. When I joined her, she was already lying on the bed. "Hurry up, dear. I'm already completely ready." I couldn't help but think, "I'm sure you're ready," while leisurely folding my clothes. Looking at her, I realized that I would miss her, but I wasn't going to let anyone else have her. She had always been exclusively mine, and I thought that she remained like that until now. Unfortunately, this was no longer the case. I knew that time was running out and soon she would no longer legally belong to me. Almost rivetedly, I bent down and kissed her lightly on the lips. Then she took the initiative, and what she began to do was well described in her emails with her lover. She obviously wanted to appease me. I decided to stop her and do probably the most terrible thing. I wanted to bring it to a climax and interrupt everything a couple of seconds before the end. Yes, I know I'm not the most original person, but I thought it was funny and appropriate for the moment. "Oh dear, you're great at this. No one can compare to you," she said when I first started. I couldn't help but wonder how many other people she was comparing me to. Her compliments did not give me any pleasure. I couldn't get it out of my head that she had been cheating on me for months, and I was in the dark. I understood that she wanted us to have a baby that night, but I knew that this would not happen. In the end, whether she was pregnant or not didn't seem to matter anymore. It was over, so I could have told her that. I sat on the edge of the bed and interrupted her at the very last moment. "Hey, what are you doing? What happened?" She howled. "Mona, we need to talk. The reason I stopped all this is because I can't stop imagining you with Derek." I heard her take a sharp breath, and when I turned to face her, she looked at me with an expression of horror on her face. "It's over, Mona. I'm going to file for divorce." She suddenly jumped up and rushed into the bathroom, throwing up. I heard it all very well when the world around her collapsed. Eventually, she stopped and tears began to flow from her eyes. I got up and looked into the bathroom. She was lying next to the toilet with her head in her hands. I left her there and went to another bathroom down the hall where I took a shower and then went to the guest room to get dressed. Downstairs, I poured myself a drink and waited for her to join me. Most likely, she would try to save something from the ruins of our marriage, perhaps even try to dissuade me from divorcing her, but I was sure that everything was over. Seated in the dimly lit room, illuminated only by the glow emanating from the kitchen, I sipped my drink and contemplated the direction of my life. Despite my youth and the potential to build the family I yearned for, and despite the upward trajectory of my career, a sense of despondency lingered. The cessation of sobbing from the bathroom signaled her transition into denial, and I anticipated her eventual descent downstairs. Sometime later, I heard her coming down the stairs and saw her into the living room dressed in a bathrobe. She sat down opposite me. I reached out and turned on the light. "Are you ready to discuss this now? Are you ready to explain why you did this?" "Yes," she murmured. "To be honest, I do not know why. The first time we did this, I swore I wouldn't do it again. We started meeting for a drink after our gatherings, and you know what happens to me after a few drinks. It seemed so tempting and sophisticated, and it got easier every time. I think hearing Sally describe what it's like to cheat on your ex-husband made me curious to try it. I should have realized that sooner or later this would happen to me since she had been divorced for a long time, and I, like a naive fool, did not stop." "Why did you do it the first time? Was there anything in our previous conversations where we discussed mutual loyalty, trust, and respect before we got married that you didn't understand? Or was there something in our wedding vows in which we promised to leave everyone else that you couldn't understand or didn't agree with? If you couldn't understand or disagreed with something, why didn't you tell me about it? I've invested 5 years of my life in you, and now I have to look for another spouse. I hope I can find someone who understands the importance of marital fidelity. Oh, Jim, can't we find a way to overcome this? I love you. I don't want you to leave me. I want to have children with you. Please, honey, let's get one thing straight. You no longer have the privilege to address me with tenderness. You lost this privilege the moment you found yourself in the same bed with him. Do you understand? I was becoming increasingly frustrated with her demeanor. Despite the impending divorce, she remained in denial, but I made a conscious effort to maintain my composure and take the moral high ground. Regarding children, when do you anticipate finding out if you're pregnant? It was the second instance that night where her complexion drained, and she stared at me in disbelief as if she couldn't comprehend what she had just heard. Oh my God, she exclaimed. Yes, I'm aware, Mona. You might wonder why I fabricated that business trip. It was to make you feel some pain. That's the main reason. I'm pursuing a divorce. You intentionally sought to conceive a child with your lover. You were hoping that I would go to bed with you after a day had passed since you got pregnant by him, and then you wanted me to take responsibility for your lover's child. Well, that's not going to happen. What you attempted is one of the most disloyal acts a wife can commit against her husband. It showed a complete lack of respect for me. I can never forgive you for that no matter what. Even if you hadn't done that, I might have considered forgiveness if it had been a one-time occurrence, but you persisted. You became addicted to infidelity, and no amount of therapy, even over 20 years, can restore my trust in you. Now, do you have anything to say to justify your actions? No, she replied, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. That's all settled then. I've started the process with Ed Wiltz to prepare divorce papers. They should be ready by Monday. We'll divide our assets evenly, 50-50, and there won't be any alimony. Even if you're pregnant, I won't be providing child support. It won't be my child. Are you okay with this agreement? It seems acceptable. I'll consult with a lawyer before I agree, but it seems acceptable, she said tearfully. Very well. I'll sleep in the spare room until we formally separate. In the meantime, I'll search for an apartment. You can stay here and see your lovers once I'm gone. It's over between Derek and me. I gathered that from your emails. It's a shame you didn't end things sooner. Oh God, you've read our emails? Yes, and I've replicated those messages to bring to your lover's wife tomorrow along with dates and times of your meetings at the Red Roof Inn. I believe she'll have some words for Derek once she's reviewed them. According to the motel records, you met there 13 times. You also used a credit card under your maiden name. It seems you held on to it from before our marriage, perhaps in anticipation of betraying me someday. It makes me wonder how many others there were before Derek. His wife deserves to know. He could potentially face child support payments if you're pregnant. It will be your decision whether you pursue that. I suppose you couldn't keep him out of this. He has children. I don't think he should escape consequences just because he has children. I may still consider filing an alienation of affection lawsuit against him. Please don't do that. She had come to terms with the divorce. Now her tears had ceased, and she was starting to think logically. We'll see. Is that all? No. Tomorrow, I'll go over and explain everything to your parents and your brother. I don't want you feeding them some fabricated story that blames me for everything. They deserve to know the truth about their daughter. And if you're pregnant, I'll find a way to inform your colleagues and our friends about what you've done to me. Oh God. She burst into tears once more. I stood up and went upstairs to bed. The following morning, I woke up early and left the house before she woke up, taking a copy of the emails and motel data with me. She had been crying most of the night and must be exhausted now. I grabbed breakfast at IHOP. Since I anticipated dining out more often from now on, I figured I might as well start getting used to it. Leisurely sipping my coffee, I waited until 7:30 and then made my way to Mona's parents' place. Knowing they were early risers, I didn't think arriving early would inconvenience them. As I knocked on the kitchen door, I saw they were having breakfast, and Mona's dad waved me in upon recognizing me. Stepping inside, they gestured to an empty chair at the table while Mona's mother poured me a cup of coffee. Why are you here so early, Jim? Would you like some breakfast? No. No breakfast. I've already eaten at IHOP, and I have some difficult news that I thought you should hear directly from me. Difficult news? I'm going to divorce Mona. Mona's mother let out a loud crash as she dropped the coffee cup she was holding onto the tile floor, shattering it. Divorce? Mona exclaimed, stunned. Jim, are you serious? We were planning to start a family. I've discovered she's been having an affair for the past few months, and she might already be pregnant by her lover, I explained solemnly. Simon, Mona's younger brother, entered the kitchen startled by the noise of the coffee cup hitting the floor just in time to catch my revelation. Oh, damn! Simon exclaimed, joining the shocked stares directed at me as if I had just announced the end of the world. Questions flew from all sides. Are you certain? This can't be happening. Where is she? Can't you work through this? Who is the other man? I did my best to answer their barrage of inquiries. Yes, I'm certain. I possess emails and motel records to corroborate it, and she confessed to it. To the best of my knowledge, she's currently at home unless she sought solace at her friend Sally's place. I don't see any way around this. I'm convinced she attempted to conceive a child with him and pass it off as mine. That's unforgivable for any husband. Her paramour is Derek Matthews, the head librarian. He's married as well, and I've heard he has children. Mona's mother sprang up and dashed to the phone. I'm dialing her right away. I can't believe that my daughter could behave so terribly. I hope you do, I replied. She's going to need both support and reproach because I don't think she comprehends the gravity of her actions. She's not just shattered our marriage but likely is as well. Mona must have still been at home because I heard her mother begin to question her. As I got up, Mona's father took my hand, tears streaming down his face, and apologized profusely. I had a great fondness for her parents and brother, and it pained me to burden them with this news, but there was no way to soften the blow. I departed feeling saddened by the devastation this would cause so many people. I had learned where Derek Matthews lived and proceeded to his residence. Parking on the street in front of their modest bungalow, I approached the front door with a packet of data and rang the bell. Derek answered the door, tears evident on his cheeks as he looked at me. May I assist you? I wish to speak with your wife and give her something, Mr. Matthews. I'm sorry. My wife isn't available. Please give it to me, and I'll make sure she receives it. Mr. Matthews, I'm aware that Mona has informed you of my arrival. There's no way you can prevent me from delivering this information to your wife or speaking with her. I advise you to allow her to come to the door, or I'll proceed with legal action against you for alienation of affection. After a moment of hesitation, he turned away and called out, Marge, there's someone here to see you. Then addressing me, he said, You scoundrel. No, Mr. Matthews, you're the one at fault for having an affair with my wife and attempting to impregnate her. You've shattered my marriage, and I aim to do the same to yours. With a sigh, he turned away from the door as his wife approached. Yes, she inquired, clearly puzzled by her husband's distressed state and my evident agitation. Mrs. Matthews, I have some unfortunate news to share with you. Your husband has been involved in a relationship with my wife for the past few months, and I'm in the process of divorcing her. I have evidence of their affair, including copies of emails exchanged between them as well as a list detailing the dates and times they met at the motel. As I delivered the news, I witnessed a sudden expression of shock wash over her face as she tried to comprehend my words. Oh my God. Are you certain? You can ask your husband, Mrs. Matthews. He's right behind you. She turned to face him and he immediately broke down in tears. I'm sorry, Marge. I'm so sorry. Her complexion turned pale as she turned back to me, and I couldn't help but express my own regret. I'm sorry too, Mrs. Matthews, that we ended up marrying such disappointing partners. I'm also sorry for you and your children. You should be aware that my wife might be pregnant with your husband's child. I suppose we won't address that until it becomes a reality. Passing her the parcel, I informed her she was free to do as she pleased with it before departing. The sight of her looking dazed and sorrowful nearly broke my heart. I longed for means to protect her from such anguish. Having accomplished my task, I made my way home. Upon arrival, I noticed Mona's absence, but I didn't bother about her whereabouts. Not long ago, I couldn't shake the feeling of incompleteness without her presence or assurance of her safety. Now, I felt indifferent. I changed into different attire and began mowing the lawn. Mona, despite the objections of her family, decided to terminate the pregnancy, which led to her significant estrangement from them. My divorce has been finalized according to my initial suggestion, leaving me single and in search of a new spouse. Having been betrayed by someone I once trusted implicitly, I'm grappling with determining the new criteria for selecting a partner. I've started therapy and delved into research on psychological ethics, unsure if it will provide any guidance but remaining hopeful as I continue my search. I had another opportunity to seek retribution against Mona 2 years post our divorce. I learned of her engagement and discovered the identity of her fiancé. After sharing with him my experiences during our marriage, he withdrew from the engagement. It was a minor triumph, and I have mutual acquaintances who will inform me if she attempts another engagement. Although the Matthews remain married, I've heard she exerts tight control over him. I suppose the presence of children can outweigh the desire to dissolve a family. I'm relieved to have learned about Mona before we began our own family. Story 2. Our usual group of 4 couples was having the normal once-a-month party. It started as a laid-back afternoon and we normally partied well into the evening. We were having a good time, having a few drinks, and telling all kinds of wild stories. It was my wife Judy and me, Ray Stiebler, my sister Pat and her husband Bruce, Vincent, Nancy and Jim Saver, and Jill and Wayne Bisler. Pat, Nancy, and Jill all worked with my wife at Connor Construction, a well-known regional construction firm specializing in public buildings, schools, and churches. Pat had introduced me to Judy 4 years ago, and after a short courtship, we became a couple. 3 years ago, we had gotten married. I thought we had a very good marriage, and I loved her with all my heart, feeling she reciprocated. As I said, the stories were flying hot and heavy, and the drinks were being poured strong and often. It wasn't too long before a couple of us were feeling no pain at all. Jill was pretty drunk by this time and was going on and on about how she had gone on a date with a guy named Jamie and got caught by her boyfriend, Philip. Philip was pissed, so of course, that ended that relationship. But she continued to date James. Sometime later, she met and dated Wayne and eventually married him. My wife Judy piped up, "Wow, Jill, that had to be really awkward. I never had any experiences like that, getting caught doing something I shouldn't have been doing." Jill, in her drunken state, responded, "Are you kidding me, Judy? You almost got caught with Carl's baby in your belly after you ducked him for that whole week 2 years ago while Ray was gone." Everyone in the room was shocked by that comment, and I heard Judy gasp. And then Wayne said, "Jill, why don't you just shut up?" I was clearly in shock at that comment and jumped up saying, "What the heck?" The next thing I knew, I was laying on the floor. I apparently had been unconscious for a couple of minutes and was just starting to come out of it. I found out later what had happened to me. I had what is called a vasovagal response, having to do with the vagus nerve. It comes about as a result of stress, sudden onset of extreme emotions, and standing up too quickly. There are other triggers as well, and one of the most recognizable is witnessing medical procedures. That is what causes soldiers to pass out while standing in line waiting to receive their shots. In that circumstance, even watching another man pass out can cause one to pass out. Anyway, I was stressed, had an extreme emotional event, and stood up too quickly, and there I was lying on the floor. They were taking care of me, and as I slowly started to come out of it, I overheard some of them talking. "Jill, why did you have to say that?" "I just don't know, Judy. I had too much to drink, and I am so sorry. I never wanted to do anything to hurt you and Ray. I am so sorry." I decided to play it cool for a couple of minutes to see what else I might learn. My sister Pat said, "Well, the cat is out of the bag now, and we just have to pass this off as drunken babble on your part." All of the others agreed and said, "We don't even know if you will remember what was said, so just play it cool and let's see if we can get past this. If he does remember, we will just say Jill was drunk and stupid." Agreed. I was finally feeling better and sat up. I knew I needed to relax for a few minutes, so I just sat there and didn't say a word. I spent that time thinking about what Jill had said and figuring out what had gone on. When I was pretty sure I was going to be okay, I slowly got to my feet and straightened myself out. Everyone was looking at me with questioning looks. I just played it cool for a minute while gradually working my way toward the door. Judy asked me, "Baby, are you all right?" I looked at her and then glanced at everyone else in the room. "No, Judy. I am not all right. I just found out that my wife is cheating. I just found out that she slept with Carl Jackson for a whole week, probably while I was away at Air National Guard training 2 years ago. I just found out that you were pregnant with this baby. I know now that you didn't have a miscarriage like you told me, so no. I am not all right." I could see the tears streaming down Judy's face, but at the moment, I had not a speck of sympathy for her. What's more, I just found out that all of you, including my own loving sister, knew about it, and no one bothered to tell me. No, I am not all right. I am getting out of here. Don't any of you follow me, don't talk to me, and don't call me. All of you just stay away from me. I had to get away, so I got into my truck and drove. I knew that I had to be alone for a while and think this all through. My truck was a bright red Ford F-150 with a ton of chrome, so I knew if I continued to use it, I couldn't stay hidden from their prying eyes for long. My friend Jack lived on a farm about 20 miles out of town, and he had a large machine shed that I could put my truck in. I knew he would be there for me, so I drove out there. I let him know that I was having some problems with Judy, and he agreed to help me out. We parked my truck in the shed, and Jack gave me a ride back into town and dropped me off at the HERS rental facility next to the airport. I rented a nondescript Chevrolet Impala for a couple of weeks. I figured by then I would have made decisions for the rest of my life and wouldn't need to be gone anymore. I checked into a decent hotel, the Courtyard by Marriott, on the outskirts of town with a lounge and restaurant. I had enough to drink earlier, and I didn't want to be any more impaired than I already was. I sat around thinking about what had happened, and some things gradually became clearer to me. It took a while, but soon, I think I knew exactly what had happened 2 years ago at Judy's Christmas party. Tanya Jackson had come on to me. She saddled up to me and said, "Ray, you are one hot guy. How would you feel about giving me a go?" I was shocked but truthfully flattered too. Tanya is a very hot woman with beautiful auburn hair and a body that would inflame desire in any man. If I was willing to have an affair, I could see she would be a lot of woman to handle. I kind of figured she was pretty drunk and really didn't mean it, but I was flattered nonetheless. I told her, however, Tanya, you certainly are beautiful and sexy as can be, but I am not a free agent. Sorry, I just won't do that to Judy. She smiled at me and said, oh, well, I tried. When you are ready for me, just give me a call. I was a little confused by that comment, but just let it slide and got back into the party. I must confess it made my night though and didn't hurt Judy's night too much either when I was extra attentive in bed later. In a repeated this past year's Christmas party, Tanya came to me again. Are you a free agent yet, Ray, baby? I sure would like a shot at you. I let my ego get stroked for a minute, but I told her, you know, Tanya, this is getting old. I told you I wouldn't do that to Judy, and I would appreciate it if you didn't do this again. Tanya said, well, that is too bad, Ray, because I think you and I would have a great time together. I won't bother you again, but when you are ready, just call. Now I realized that Tanya knew all along that Carl had slept with Judy, and she was trying to get even with him. I decided to call her to talk after I had thought things through. I looked up Carl Jackson's phone number and made the call. Fortunately, Tanya answered the phone and not Carl. Tanya, this is Ray Stiebler. I am ready to talk. If you can get away, I would like to meet in the lounge at the Marriott Hotel. She told me that she would be there in 30 minutes. Great. I will be waiting there for you right on time. Tanya walked into the lounge and every eye in the place was on her. She was as beautiful as I remembered from the Christmas party. She had on a modest but very attractive dress and her long auburn hair hung down her back. I think everyone in the lounge turned to look at her as she walked up to me at the bar. I gave her a gentle hug, and we took a booth in the back of the room because I wanted a bit of privacy with what I wanted to talk to her about. Tanya, I called you to talk, and I'm pretty sure you know the reason. Just tell me straight out. Did you or did you not know about Carl sleeping with my wife, Judy? She got a mischievous smile on her face and said, Ray, of course, I knew about it. Why do you think I wanted to play around a bit with you? I wanted to have fun with you, and I still want to do that. Well, I just became aware of that little dance today, Tanya, and I am not certain you and I playing around, as you call it, would be in our best interest at this time. But I really do want to know everything you know about the situation. I know that they did have sex because I actually caught them in my house. I was supposed to be spending some time with my mother but decided to come home early. I caught them playing in my bed, Ray. They didn't know that I saw them because I left and went to stay with a friend of mine for the night. I didn't want to confront them together until I had time to think things through. I figured a night with my friend would let me clear my mind. If you need to verify that, I will give you her name and telephone number. Anyway, when I came home the next day, I confronted Carl about having an affair. At the time, I didn't know the woman's name, and Carl tried to lie his way out of the whole thing. But I told him I actually saw him, and no matter how many lies he told me, they weren't going to get him out of it this time. I asked, what do you mean this time? I suspected that he had had other affairs, but had been able to lie his way out of them in the past. I never had proof before, but now I did. I was confused, but asked, if you caught him with my wife and suspected him in other affairs, why are you still with him? I can't help it, Ray. I love him. We sat down and I told him I was going to divorce him unless he confessed everything to me. Unless he promised me that he would never cheat on me again. Unless he promised me he would agree to let me get my revenge with you without a word. We went to a lawyer and he wrote it all up for us and Carl signed it. If he goes back on his word, I get everything in a divorce. He confessed everything about his numerous affairs. Every little detail. Who, when, where, and how many times. He was pretty detailed, Ray, so I think I know it all. He did promise to never cheat on me again if I would stay with him, and he did promise that I could get my revenge without any comments or repercussions. I smiled at her and told her truthfully, I am not ready to be your ducking revenge man just yet, Tanya. Not until you tell me every gory detail, you know. I want to know everything. Over the next 2 hours, Tanya filled me in on everything I wanted to know about Judy and Carl's affair. It started with flirting and downright pursuit on Carl's part, and eventually, with Judy's curiosity about a man and me being at Air National Guard camp for a full week, she gave into his advances and spent hours with him every day while I was gone. As far as Tanya knew, Judy never knew that she and Carl had been caught dead to rights by her. She told me what she knew of the other affairs, and when she had finished with that subject, I think I knew as much about Carl's affairs as he did. By the time we were done, I had made some decisions about what I was going to do about Judy and what I wanted to do about Tanya. I asked her, Tanya, I am going to get away from here for a few days. Will your revenge allow you to accompany me? She actually grinned at me. As far as I am concerned, yes, but I will have to tell Carl and I'm not sure he would agree. It seems to me from what you have said that he can't say no. But tell him this, Either he agrees to let you go away with me on a little trip for, let's say, a week or sometime in the near future. I am going to kick out of him and fix him so he never ducks you or another wife of some other poor ever again. That ought to motivate his decision, I would think. Laughingly, she replied, I would think. Come up to my room for a few minutes, then, while I make the arrangement. With that, we walked out of the lounge and took the elevator up to my floor and walked down the hall to my room. Once inside, I took Tanya's hand and led her over to the sofa. Before I let her sit down, I pulled her close to me and kissed her. I said, if we are going to be flying off to Vegas for a week, I should at least have a sample of what I hope to be getting there. She squealed, Vegas? You are going to take a little trip to Las Vegas with me? I don't care what Carl says. I am going with you. I have never been to Las Vegas, and I have always wanted to go. Okay, then let me make a couple of calls, and then I will send you home to inform Carl and do a bit of light packing. I turned on my cell phone and saw several messages from Judy, which I deleted without listening to them, and I saw one message from my sister, Pat. I decided to return that one immediately, so I hit the redial number for that call. When she answered, I didn't give her a chance to talk when I simply said, Pat, I thought I made myself perfectly clear when I said no one, and that includes my traitorous sister, should call me. I said no calls. Believe me when I tell you, one last time, all of you leave me alone. Then I hung up. I went to my contact list and dialed up Vince Amato. His real name is Vincenzo, but he had pretty much Americanized it to make it simpler for himself. He and I were best friends in high school and college, and we still got together a couple of times a year. I think our friendship will last a lifetime. When he answered, I said, Vincenzo, if you say yes, I will think you are the best casino host in Las Vegas. But if you say no, I will keep on thinking you are the biggest horse's ass. Do you have a room available for me starting tomorrow night? Can you make that happen? Which is it going to be? Yes or no? His response was as usual. Assuming this is the biggest former friend of mine who should consider himself lucky if I ever even talk to him again, would I ever give you a room? I might put you up in a broom closet. However, the Bellagio Hotel and Casino would be delighted to give you a room for a few days. Are you coming out alone or will you have that adorable wife of yours with you? Vince, my adorable wife isn't so adorable to me anymore, so she isn't coming with me. But I will not be alone. I think it might be best if you can arrange for a room with 2 beds just to be on the safe side. We are both married to the two who cheated together, and we may or may not get to use her term's revenge. At any rate, 2 beds would be nice. I am sorry to hear about you and Judy, but I will arrange everything and text you with the reservation information and so forth. Is there anything else you need, Ray? As a matter of fact, Vince, do you have any flights from here that you could get us on? He laughed. You know, you really are an ass, Ray. But I can make that happen too. I will text you with details. See you tomorrow. Tanya just sat there with her mouth hanging open, totally confused with what just took place. I suppose I should fill you in. Vince is a longtime friend of mine who happens to be a casino host at the Bellagio. I was the best man at his wedding to Felicia, and I have known them both for years. I try to get there a couple of times a year, and whenever I do go, I can usually count on a room. I don't mind that Vince gives me a room. Just enjoy the ride, Tanya, because it will be a fun and wild one. We spent 4 nights in Vegas. I always try to figure out how much the trip cost me, and this time it was only about $750 with all food and drinks. Tanya enjoyed herself at the shows we saw in the casino, gambling with me and by herself, and in the bedroom where we used 1 bed. The sex was fantastic, and I really enjoyed being with her too. I think we got along fantastically. On the last morning when we were done packing for the trip home, Tanya told me she wanted to talk. Ray, after you confront your wife, you need to decide if you're going to stay with her or divorce her. Either way, I think I would like to be with you again, and I hope you would like to be with me too. When you have made your decision, will you give me a call? Depending on what you decide, I might have a proposal for you. Okay, Tanya, I definitely will call you in a few days. I have to say I had a wonderful time with you and enjoyed making love to you. You are an amazing woman. Thank you too for all of the information you gave me about Carl's affairs. It will come in very handy in the near future. When we got back into our hometown, I called Judy and said, I want to come home and talk, but I won't do it unless the entire group gets back together so I can talk to all of you at one time. Judy said, Ray, can't just the 2 of us talk? No, I want to talk to all of you at the same time, and if you don't arrange that, I will not come home at all. She agreed, and we set a time, and Judy said she would have all of them there. Tanya and I took an Uber to her house, and I had the driver wait for me while I walked her to her door. I pulled her into me in a tight hug and gave her a long and passionate kiss. I don't know if Carl was there or if he could see Tanya, but I certainly hoped he could. The Uber guy took me to Jack's and I picked up my truck. I called Judy again to make sure that everyone was there and they were. When everyone was assembled in the living room, I confronted Judy about the affair. I accused her of deceiving me and lying to me for 2 years. Judy, you cheated on me and got yourself pregnant so you had an abortion. You knew I would find out. You had a medical issue so you lied to me and told me that you had had a miscarriage. You said that the miscarriage somehow caused damage to you so that you could never have children. I felt so bad for both of us, but I loved you so much and told you that it didn't matter. I treated you like a queen because you seemed so sad, and I wanted to comfort you and let you know how much I loved you and how special you were to me. You didn't deserve any of that, though. Your abortion was the cause of you not being able to have children in the future, not a miscarriage. Every day we have been together since then, we have been living a lie. Judy, here is the bottom line. I forgive you for your affair with Carl. I forgive you for lying to me about the abortion, claiming it was a miscarriage. I forgive you for all the deception over the last 2 years. The room had been quiet during all of my statements, but when I said I forgave her, there was a collective sigh and some guarded conversation. I just sat there for a bit, putting my thoughts in order. I said, let me continue. Over the past week, I have been with Tanya Jackson. She filled me in on everything about your affair. It seems she saw the two of you and confronted Carl. And, yes, in case you were wondering, we did have sex and it was amazing. Tanya is beautiful. We've become very close. In fact, one of the things Tanya told me is that Carl is infertile. This means, my dear wife, that if you didn't sleep with other guys during that same time, you weren't pregnant by Carl. As Jill eloquently put it, you were pregnant with my child. I will never forgive you for that ever. Tears are running down Judy's face, and she can barely stay upright in her chair. The look on her face was total upset at what she had done, but I had no sympathy, not for her and not for any of the others who had looks of disbelief on their faces too. I had been standing up this whole time, so when I was about to leave the room in my house, I turned back to the group and said, by the way, Tanya told me that Carl confessed to affairs with several blonde women in addition to Judy. Oh, wait, I suppose I should mention that the list included Jill and Nancy and Pat too. So guys, it appears that all 4 of our wives wanted to try other men, but at least I had the decency to tell you. None of you had the decency to tell me, so I don't have a lot of sympathy for you now. Good luck with your marriages. It was a few days later that I called Judy and said, I am filing for divorce and you will be served soon. I think it would be wise if you do not fight me on this or everyone, including your family, will hear about your sordid tale. I promise to be fair to you even if your actions were not fair to me. Just sign the papers when you're served. The lease on this house is up in 2 months, and I will pay the rent until then. But if you want to stay there, you will have to sign the lease on your own. There will be some spousal support, I suppose, but you don't earn that much less than I do, so don't expect it to be a huge amount or to last too long. Just take the deal that is offered and sign the papers. Judy was served 2 days later and signed the papers after the requisite time. The divorce was final. Judy had cried herself to sleep every night after I left and was almost comatose the day the divorce was final. She and I never talked again. She knew she had ruined her marriage and just couldn't forgive herself for what she had done. Eventually, she started dating again but never had a serious relationship. She just couldn't be happy with someone else. The other couples from our group were all still together even though they went through some tough times. Our first family gathering was pretty tense. Our parents wanted Pat and me to kiss and make up, but I wasn't prepared to do that yet. I guess she wasn't either because I got scolded quite a bit. I really didn't care what she thought. Her husband, Bruce, did come up to me though and apologized to me. He said, I'm sorry, Ree. I know now that I should have told you, but Pat didn't want the subject to come up for obvious reasons. She knew if we spilled the beans with you that all the other affairs would come out too. I really am sorry though. I told him, thanks, Bruce. I wish you would have told me too. It would have kept me from wasting 2 years of my life. I did call Tanya as soon as the divorce was final. She said, well, I expected you to call sooner, Ray, but I am glad you did. Now you know. Carl was not happy that you and I spent the week in Vegas, but he knew he had to accept it. When I got home, I told him that I was going to ask you for a favor, Ray. I want children, and Carl will never be able to give them to me. I would love for you to be the father of my children. We hit it off in Vegas, and I am sure you would have to agree that we are very compatible. During my fertile time, I would come and stay with you for a few days and we can make love, hopefully, impregnating me. Carl is not happy about this either, but I told him it was the only way I would stay with him, so he agreed. I was somewhat shocked by this, but not totally. Tanya, you know I like you a lot, and we had a fantastic time in Las Vegas. Making love with you was everything a man could want. I have to tell you, though, a long-term affair and impregnating you isn't something I would want to do. I think that Carl deserved the week we had together, but it isn't in my nature to do that to someone long-term. Plus, if I impregnate you, I would want to be in a relationship with you and be there to raise my children. I am sorry, but I just can't do it the way you asked. If you decide to divorce Carl, you and I can get to know each other. And if we click, we could get married and have children. That is my offer to you. Regardless, I think that you and I can be friends. I do know that we clicked that much in the short time we were together. Call me if you want to do lunch sometime. Good luck, Tanya. You are a wonderful woman.